Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the OPA call for November 2022, November 14th. OPA stands for Organic Products Associates. And for those of you who aren't familiar what OPA means, it was the organization started by Mary and Gary Loomis many years ago, and they wanted to give their organization a name that would be generic but meaningful, and they knew their organization would grow large. They had that vision, right? It would grow very large and very successful, and people would be a part of that OPA family. And they have passed on and left the business to their son, Rob Loomis, whom many of you met on our call tonight. Welcome, Rob. And it's just a fabulous organization, 10 or 11 master coordinators, and we have a great time. It's just fabulous. And every month on the second Monday of the month, the OPA family call like tonight takes place. And each of the master coordinators in the OPA organization is the host. And we're very fortunate to be the host this month. So our call tonight's going to be very exciting and power-packed. It's going to be awesome. So without further ado, we're going to start. Get your pens and papers out. And we have several speakers. We're going to begin with Shackley, Senior Master Coordinator from New York, Stephen Tuvell. And Steve's a great speaker, and the time is now yours, Steve. Take it away.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Hannah. First of all, I do want to thank you for inviting me to participate on your Zoom call tonight. And I have to say, when Alan first connected with me and told me the theme of tonight's meeting, I kind of chuckled to myself, because if you're a part of any one of the masters that are here tonight, you know that they have wonderful personalities. They do a great job of training, and everything that I'm going to be talking about tonight is, let's see, I would say it's BSM, before social media. All right, and we were all asked to share with the group some incidents or events or stories that we've gone through in our Shackley businesses through the years. And collectively, if you were to ask each of the masters that are speaking tonight, which is an honor to share the platform with you guys, there's probably about 300 years of Shackley experience here. So there's got to be some amusing stories and lessons and motivation and inspiring things that we can pull from. So what I would like to do is, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm sure you know my wife, Jeannie Tuvell, who you have heard speak a gazillion times, and she's always ready to pack her suitcase and go somewhere to do a talk somewhere. So I'm the homebody. So I want to thank the Sharapins for at least asking me to speak. Yes, I do talk. I want to establish that. So what I'd like to do very briefly, for those of you who don't know who I am, I would like to just share how we got started in the business. And to do that, I just want to mention that my background is in teaching, and my wife, Jeannie, as well. We were both teachers in the Westchester County down here in lower New York. And about 15 years after I taught and loved what I was teaching, I was dissatisfied with a number of things, which is not unusual for many, many teachers, particularly nowadays. Anyway, I was having some real health challenges, and I'm talking about going back to the early 1980s. And so I had some real bad health challenges, which I won't burden you with tonight. And also, after 15 years, I was a father of two very active sons. We had our own home, we had a mortgage, we had all kinds of debt. And so I knew that if I just continued to teach, it would not satisfy our financial needs. And lastly, Jeannie loved being a teacher, but she also loved being a mom. And she loved the idea of being a stay-at-home mom. And quite frankly, we didn't know if we could afford for Jeannie to be a stay-at-home mom. Well, regardless of all the things that I just shared with you now, lucky for me that another teacher in my school knew about my health challenges. And she introduced me to some Shackley products. I used the Shackley products for just about 2 or 3 weeks, and I already experienced some changes in my digestive system, and had more energy to run after the kids in the classroom, and just had a better sense of well-being. And so one night they came over, they meaning this teacher and her husband, and they shared the story of Shackley. And I got excited because I saw the potential in it. And Jeannie was kicking me under the table because she didn't want to have, at that time, anything to do with this. But we saw that it would really be a good fit. And as the dutiful wife that she is today, we made an agreement that we would learn how to do this business of Shackley and pursue it for a year. And at the end of a year, we would evaluate our progress and see if it was worth our continuing. Well, needless to say, here we are 40 years later. 40 years later, boy, that's kind of frightening. 40 years later. And number one, I have a much better awareness of nutrition, of better health, and have had the opportunity not only to improve mine, but also to help hundreds and hundreds of people do the same. Our income has really increased our lifestyle. We've had a wonderful life so far and could hopefully continue to have that one thanks to Shackley. We have a wonderful income where, being a retired teacher, I really don't have to worry about our future income-wise. And we've traveled all over the world with Shackley and had many, many kinds of both tangible and intangible benefits. So we were really very blessed to have Shackley come into our life. And Jeannie, for that matter, had the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom, and she never had to go back, even though she loved doing it. Her priority was to be at home, to be a stay-at-home mom, and at the same time, to be able to do something of value, of purpose, and bring some income into the house. So in a nutshell, that's kind of our story. What I would like to do now is, and I have a feeling that over the next half hour or 40 minutes, you're going to hear possibly some overlapping stories, because I'm sure that we've all experienced similar kinds of things in our Shackley business. So what I've done is I've highlighted something that really isn't being done too much in Shackley nowadays. And I've gleaned a few cute little stories. And then I have something else that I'd like to share with you. First of all the stories that I'm about to share with you are based around our in-home meetings, meaning in our personal home. I don't know how many of you, besides the masters that are speaking tonight, have hosted people in your own home. Well, Jeannie and I have done that for about 25 to 30 years. We consistently, every Tuesday night, invited guests and ambassadors and distributors and people who were looking to build Shackley businesses into our home. And we would teach and coach them in all the fundamental skills of this business. And we enjoy doing that. Now, I mentioned that Jeannie and I both have background in teaching. And as teachers, we look to inspire our students. We look to motivate our children, our students, and in general, just in some way, build their understanding and appreciation of the subject that we taught. I happen to be an art teacher, so I really loved what I was doing. So here we were teachers. We had this wonderful skill, or at least everybody thinks that we had a great head start because we were teachers. Well, let me tell you, on Tuesday night, when we were in front of the class teaching, we had about anywhere from 15 to 30 people in our home. First of all, we had some senior members in our group, and it was really discouraging to be able to, and by the way, we were looking to make our meetings as exciting and motivating as possible, as I'm sure you have also. Well, it was a little discouraging to be doing what we were doing, as motivated as we were, to look out and see just a couple of our senior leaders fast asleep. And so luckily I didn't have that experience as a teacher in a public school, but so we did find it kind of amusing at the time. And actually one of those ladies who was fast asleep in our class, so to speak, actually became our very first, they were called supervisor. They were called supervisors in those days, but invariably she'd be fast asleep. So basically, what was the lesson we learned? You don't have to teach anything. You just have to find the right people to do this business, right? All right, another little quick snippet that I can share with you. We have it in our home. We have our downstairs was designed to host large groups of people. And so every Tuesday night, as I've said, we would do our thing. We would have our meeting. And I noticed that after a while, there would be this thumping noise. And it would go on for at least 20 minutes to a half hour. And I couldn't figure out what the thumping noise was. Every Tuesday night, we would start talking and there would be this thumping noise. Well, after a while, a giant light bulb went off over my head. And I said to the group and to Jeannie, I said, excuse me for a minute. So I left the meeting. I went upstairs, and our bedroom is directly above our meeting area, our meeting room. And there I found my 12-year-old and my 8-year-old son jumping on our bed. So they absolutely took every opportunity every Tuesday night to do that. They loved jumping on our bed. And we, our generation of parenting, we never let our children jump on the furniture. Well, that's why they did it. So that's another little snippet that I wanted to share with you. That thumping noise wasn't the plumbing, wasn't the heating, it wasn't the raccoons or the bears. It was my sons. So we had to put a stop to that. And let me just share one more thing with you. We were, once again, it's based around our meeting on Tuesday nights. Jeannie and I were knee deep in what we were doing. And then there was a knock on our door. And I went upstairs, opened the door, and there was a policeman and a fireman. And behind them was a police car and fire engines. And for the life of me, I had no idea what was going on. Well, the police officer was very polite, and he just really told us, remember, these are in-home meetings. In our community, we have no sidewalks. We are a fairly rural/suburban community, and there are no sidewalks. So when you have 15 to 30 people coming into your home, where do they, park their cars? So they were parking on both sides of the road. And needless to say, after 15 years of doing that, my neighbors got a little miffed at that. And somebody called the police on us. They literally called the police. And they came and they told us that we really could not every week have people park on both sides of the road. Okay, so another challenge in our business. I don't know. Oh, and by the way, when people left our meetings, and invariably when they ended, people didn't want to leave our house. I was still working. And at the end of the meeting, you have 15, 20, 30 people who are excited, who are energized, who really want to talk and share about stories of their own business. Well, I had to get up the next morning and go to work. So I would literally have to say, people, meeting's over. It's time to go home. And like a teacher, they ignored me. As a matter of fact, when they eventually left the house, they would be talking. This is probably why the police and fire department were here also. They would be talking outside my house in the street. They didn't want to go home, right? They did not want to go home. So I could go on and on with these kinds of stories, but I just thought I'd share the more humor side. Oh, and by the way, when Alan told me the theme of tonight's meeting, I kind of thought it was, I gave it a title. I called it The Lighter Side of Shackley. That's what I thought we would call this, the lighters, although there are some serious things that you will be hearing from the masters as well. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to do a screen share. And for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to just share something that I think you're going to find very interesting. Yes, it's another story. I'm not going to be teaching you how to prospect or use your cell phone or anything like that. I'm just going to share. Let's see if we can bring it up. Here it is. Okay. All right. Now, all right, so can everybody see that now, the slide? Great, okay. So what you're looking at is a photograph of the very first, I'll call it house, that I lived in when I graduated college and got my first and only teaching job. And as you look at, let me just briefly describe this house. Number one, you're looking at it from an angle that you as the observer are below the house, correct? So you're looking up, and the reason why you're looking up is because the steps to get up to this house numbered 50. There were 50 steps to get from the street level to this little cottage. There was no garage. So imagine, well, luckily we were young. So carrying all kinds of groceries, luggage, furniture was an impossibility. And so there was this house. which was under, I would say, between 400 and 500 square feet, the whole house. The lower level had a living room that was about 10 by 12, and there was a kitchen that was about 6 by 6. The upstairs, which you see the window upstairs, was 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. The only source of heat was a indoor propane burner or gas burner that provided heat for the whole house. So if there's no heat upstairs, how do you get upstairs? There was a Chinese screen, like a folding screen, that we would put in front of the propane or gas heater, and we would divert the heat from the little living room upstairs to the bedroom and the bathroom. Now, folks, winters in New York are awfully cold, and it was kind of, it was a big shock to wake up, to go to school, and not find any heat upstairs. So anyway, the house was owned by a very nice couple that wanted and were renting the house out. And as I graduated college and got my first job, as I said, I needed a place to live. This house was recommended to me, and the price was right. It was $120 a month. So I grabbed it. Really had no experience whatsoever living on my own, but I took the place, had a roommate. I shared the house with another person, another teacher, and the couple that owned it wanted to sell it. They were an elderly couple that lived in Manhattan and spent their summers in this home. Well, I was very happy there. I lived on my own for a while, and then Jeannie and I married, and we spent the first year of our marriage in this house. So there was not much to decorate, let's put it that way. But this couple wanted to sell the house, okay? And they wanted to sell it to us, and they wanted to sell it to us for $19,000. Now, this is prime real estate in Westchester County. Folks, Westchester County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. When they offered us the house, we thought of everything negative about the house. The stairs, no garage, no heat. The basement, as you see, there's a little sort of a little gate or doorway at the bottom of the photograph. That was the basement. That was the only way to get into the basement. Every spring, with the spring thaw, that basement would fill with melted water. So we saw all the flaws in this house, and we were literally insulted that this couple wanted us to actually buy this house. Needless to say, we didn't buy it, and we moved on. Okay, fast forward. A few years later, I was browsing our local newspaper, and I was browsing through the real estate section, and I came across this newspaper. This is the exact real estate section back in 2014. I want to show you, if we had the vision, the foresight, and we're willing to take a chance. This is what the house was selling for. Remember, this is a small little house. The people who bought it did make some renovations. They don't have a lot of room. The footprint remained the same, so they couldn't put that much money in. But here's the price of the house. Remember, it's $19,000. If we had bought it a few years later, it was worth $260,000 for the same home that we had the fear and the hesitation to buy. Okay, so why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because, you know, with all the cute little stories that I might have shared with you, Jeannie and I learned a life-changing lesson from this experience that I'd like to share with you very briefly. And it's this. At that time, we really didn't see the future. We didn't have the vision to see the potential of this house. Somebody did, and they improved it. And it's really a much better looking house today. As I said, they still have the same footprint, but they have heat, which was a major improvement, and things like that. But Jeannie and I learned a lesson that we really could have kicked ourselves and realized that there are lessons in life, and this was one that we didn't take advantage of. And so I shared with you because when Shackley was shown to us 40 years ago, we were both very fearful. We didn't have the skills. We had no business skills. and really didn't have any kind of experience in sales. So this is a lesson that I felt I would really like to share with you, that for those of you who have decided that you're building a Shackley business, congratulations. And if there are people on tonight that are evaluating Shackley to see what's in it for them and what kind of people there are, and is there anybody going to help them, and will it be the right decision? For Jeannie and Steve Tuvell, it was the right decision. And quite frankly, we've made other decisions in life that normally we might not have made before Shackley. So I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you. But remember, when you see opportunities, make sure you take advantage of them. Alan, Hannah, back to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And for all the listeners, we're going to show some real appreciation at the end tonight, because got a lot of stuff to get in. So next on our agenda, Hannah Sharpen, Shackley Lifetime Master Coordinator. So take it away, Hannah.
Well, welcome everybody to the call. I'm so glad you're here. And of course, I'm sure you all enjoyed Steve's talk as much as I did. One of the things we talked about with this program tonight is we wanted to really illustrate in many different ways: commitment, determination, dreams, visions, and focus. And some people were introduced to Shackley by products and some by business. In our case, a rabbi actually came in to officiate at my aunt's funeral, and he's the one that actually introduced us to Shackley at that time. A lot of people probably think that was inappropriate for him to do it when he came in for that reason. However, if he had not shared with us, when I think of my health and my issue with Crohn's and some other health issues I had, I might not have ever gotten that help. We might not have been able to help all these other people that have been helped through Shackley, and certainly would have also made a difference in our life and our lifestyle. And so we're so grateful that he chose to. So think about that at any time you're hesitating to talk to people. You have no idea whose life you might change. So we got very excited when he came in and started to explain to us about the business, because we actually called him to come back and tell us. And so one of the things I told him is that I'm not a salesperson. I don't want to become one. And I had difficulty in front of other people until I got to know them. In fact, the parents in my preschool talked to me later and said before Shackley that when I would be great with the kids, but when I'd have a parent meeting, I'd hold my notes up in front of my face so I didn't have to see anybody. So I knew that as excited as we were, that I had to push through a real comfort zone wall, and over and over and over again. You know, to see people, to get to talk to people. And in terms of driving, in those days, we really went out and saw a lot of people. We didn't have the Zoom capability. And I drive myself with no GPS and no cell phone.
Thank you.
So we actually entered Shackley July 1st. And I knew that going back to my preschool in November and September was going to mean we really had 2 months to really get this off the ground. So Alan and I just jumped in with both feet and decided that we were going to take all of our spare time, turned off the TV, made sure that we only went out with friends once a week, spent a whole day with our children, did the various things that we wanted to do, but yet still be able to provide the kind of business that we were looking to develop. So in our first month, we became, as Steve mentioned, it used to be called supervisors, but you really had to be in 3 months before you could get appointed. And I only tell you about what we did, not to pat ourselves on the back by any means, but to let you know that if you really have the kind of determination and commitment, what is achievable. So in that first month, we did over 3,000. By the third month, we had accumulated 22,000 volume in those first 3 months. And that was simply because we just never stopped talking. We were on the phone or we were seeing people. And one of the things that happened, my mother was so excited when she heard that our first bonus check was $3,390. And she couldn't wait to tell my brother. And my brother's reaction was, yeah, but did they try to cash it yet? And you know, you might have those same kind of experiences when you're getting started. But you know, of course, it's fun to have the last laugh. One of the things that happened is that after just 1 month in business, Mary Loomis asked us to come to New York City. She was doing a program there, and she wanted me to be, Alan and me to be on a panel. And so we headed off, we go into this room, and it's packed with people. And our first reaction was we looked at each other and said, someday we're going to pack a room like this. We started that vision then. And then, of course, Mary Loomis came up with one of her absolutely brilliant statements in her talk. Never forgot it, resonated with me. We teach it all the time. And that is the only difference between master coordinators and everybody else, as master coordinators get knocked down more than anybody else. But the difference is they just keep getting back up. And Mary certainly always had wisdom, but that was a really powerful one. So the kinds of things that we did are things that hopefully you're all doing by listening to podcasts and getting on Zooms and webinars and things like that. Well, in those days, we didn't have that. So we listened to tapes. I listened to them while I was cooking, while I was cleaning, while I was taking care of the kids and driving in a car, all to learn and to keep ourselves motivated. And Alan was in the insurance business, so he had a lot more, took more time away from the business because he was so busy with the insurance business, even more than my preschool, that he jumped in within 2 days of being in business and became a full partner. And it's a good thing he did because he encouraged me when I was so shy and uncomfortable. And one of the tapes that I was listening to going on all these appointments was one by Jenny Williams, Master Coordinator Jenny Williams, when she talked about going at a great distance just to deliver a tube of lipstick that Shackley had at the time. And the idea was to show whatever it takes. I listened to another video, another audio, going to an appointment, and it was by a fellow who was quite humorous to begin with, but he talked about doing an appointment on somebody's porch, and as he sat down in the chair, he realized immediately that the paint on the chair was not dry. And he tried to concentrate the whole time that he was doing this presentation on the presentation rather than how was he going to get out of the chair. And he thought, well, maybe it'll just rip as he stands up. But no, it didn't. He stood up and so did the chair right with him. And I was laughing so hard, I actually missed my turn to the appointment. Alan and I started doing something every night. We'd go to bed and we would talk about and visualize getting awards, being on stage, building a big business, having a large group, and very importantly, making a difference in other people's lives. And started affirmations about that same time too. Been doing affirmations most of the time we've been in business. And I do them as I'm going to sleep at night, as I'm waking up in the morning. And what has happened over the years is that I have found that I'm saying the affirmations before I'm even fully awake. And it's interesting that if you read about affirmations, what they will tell you is that when you get to the point where you aren't even aware, it means it's gotten into your subconscious, and that's when you actually make things happen. We never took our eyes off the goal, except briefly when something would happen, perhaps. Goal boards, really valuable because we always could keep more focused that way. But you know, this business is like everything else in life. Life happens. And if you work for somebody else, no matter how life happens, most people show up, right? Well, in Shackley, sometimes we forget because we're our own boss to show up no matter what. And, you know, when I say life happens, I just jotted down some of the things that happened to us over the years we've been in Shackley. My mom passed away. Alan's father passed away. One of my brothers died. We had surgeries. Our daughter, Hallie, 6 years ago, had a surgery that almost cost her life and was very traumatic for quite some time for us all. Our 3 daughters had weddings, which we put a great deal of time into. We have grandchildren, and we not only put the time into getting to be with them, but attending a lot of their events as well as we did with all of our children, all of their growing up years. But, you know, you don't have to let momentum and focus stop, because if you do, it's much harder to get it started again. Much easier to just keep it going. You know, good incident, an example of an incident that happened is we had somebody come into the office in the morning and say, I decided that we don't think we can do this business. I said, that's your right, but do you mind if we ask you what made you decide that? And they said, yes, we have 5 kids. But later in the day, somebody else came in and said, we've decided to build this business. We said, oh, great. What made you decide that? And I said, we have 5 kids. Just a difference in perspective, isn't it? We returned from a company earned trip where we had been recognized for achievements. And yet what happened is we found out when we came home on a high that 5 people had decided to quit the business, just quit when we returned. But we had decided that quitting was not an option. And once you make that decision, that quitting is not an option, you will always find your how. But we made that commitment. After teaching all day, sometimes we drove 2.5 hours each way to do a program, and sometimes had a no-show at that as well. The determination, one of the things that I love this story because as it happened, I never dreamed I'd be telling this many years later. But we had an idea that we could find to help people Shakleyize by going into their home every week for a handful of weeks, and every week doing another product line. And the final week would be business and philosophy. So with this couple, and was at night to do this appointment on the household products. So the household products, to take every household product and to take all the demos, meant 2 large boxes about this big, and got to the home and had never been there before, did not realize that they lived on the steepest street in all of our valley. And by the time I got there, the ice had frozen solid. I realized there was no way I was going to make it down that hill in a car. Fearful of driving any hill, I couldn't imagine sliding down that hill. So I got out of the car, pulled the 2 boxes out, put one in front of me, one behind me, and got down on my hands and knees and slid down the hill because they lived at the bottom of the hill. And you know what I did the whole time going down? I kept saying, I am a master coordinator. I am a master coordinator. I am a master coordinator. And that's some of the things sometimes we have to do to just keep our focus, to be able to remember where our goals are. Another thing happened this one time that was incredible, very early in our business. We had found a new builder, and he found somebody 90 miles away, a nurse who wanted to build the business. So we told her to get a group of people in, and we would drive there with Rick, which we did. And when we got there, it was kind of a little scary place because it was in an alley. That was the first clue. The second clue was there was a latch on the door, not a doorknob. And as she opened the door slightly, she said, hurry up in. They had a robbery upstairs earlier. So by that point, I little heart pounding a little bit. And we go in and we go to say where we're going to set up. And she said, we can set up in here. She had 2 rooms, a kitchen and a living room. The living room had almost no light whatsoever, so that was not going to work. So we said, well, we'll have to do it in the kitchen. And as we're setting up the easel and putting out a display, we said, where are the chairs? She didn't have any kitchen chairs. Do you have any folding chairs? No. Do your neighbors have folding chairs? No. So Alan, Rick, and I stood the whole time, and people had canceled out on her, but she still expected a few people. And all of a sudden there's a knock at the door and they, let us in, let us in. So she opens the door and this woman pulls a motorcycle into her kitchen, a big motorcycle. And she said, I'm not leaving it out there in this dangerous neighborhood. So there were 3 people that came. The one guy said, oh, I've heard about Shaklee already. So he went in the living room, sat in a chair in the dark. And the other 2 are there to listen with the nurse to what we had to say. And they're acting very disinterested all the way. I mean, no matter what we're saying, except the guy in the other room, in the dark room. He had heard about Shaklee before. Every point we'd make, he'd say, yep, 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 they're right. Yep, they're right. And we thought, boy, that's going to really help because it is going to give us extra credibility. But it didn't seem to work by any means. So we're getting to the end of the presentation. And because in the beginning, we didn't have anything to prove for ourselves, any proof of success. So you borrow your upline success, right? So we pulled up Mary and Gary Loomis, a copy of their check. And I believe at that time it was $13,000. And the woman on the motorcycle thrust forward with a very low cut t-shirt which suddenly revealed very generous chest that had tattoos all over it. And Alan and Rick were having such a time to make sure that they were trying to be so that they weren't looking at all. And I was laughing and killing myself over that. So it was really funny, but guess what happened? The nurse was too embarrassed to do it. The people that came weren't interested, nor was the guy who kept saying, yes, we were right about everything. And we had to pay a babysitter for the whole day. But you know what? These are the kinds of things that you can laugh about today. So, collect your stories as you go along too, because you never know what kind of funny thing you might be saying someday. And one of the things that we found didn't matter whether it was a flat tire and not having a phone to call, all the kinds of things that happened. I drove 60 miles to do a program, and while I'm there was a sudden snowstorm, and I'm afraid to drive, and yet I have to come home, but having no cell phone to call anybody to give me any help. And yet, I made it home, but I kept feeling again that motivation that made us even more determined what we were going to do. And the funniest might have been the situation when we were asked to come do a program and get to the women's house. I knew that where they lived, but I didn't know that they had a lot of animals, and they didn't have a farm. So all the animals were very close to the house. So I'm doing this presentation with the sheep bleating over here and the chickens clucking over here. And behind my head is a cage with a parrot who commented on every statement that I made. It was absolutely hilarious. And, one of the things that we talk about in this business is not just the funny things and the difficult things and the wonderful things. And I know you hear about a lot of the wonderful things on Mission Possible and all these other calls, but we want tonight to make sure that you got to hear our stories and the kinds of things that master coordinators experienced in their growing years. So whatever you've decided, whether you want to be a master coordinator or whatever rank you choose to be, I hope for you will all decide to do what it takes to get there. Of course, staying legal and ethical, but outside of that, so that you will be able to take those hardest times and be able to make good stories to share with other people. Thanks, and so glad to again that you're all with us. Now I can't wait to hear our next speaker.
Thank you, Hannah. And again, we'll have a group thank you at the end. But our next speakers are Shackley Lifetime Senior Master Coordinators from South Carolina, Pat and Dawn Semeka, another pair of great friends. So Pat and Dawn, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you.
Oh my gosh, what fun stories.
What an honor to be on with Steve and Hannah and soon to come Barb, some of our favorite people in this business. Gosh, I hope you have as much fun listening to this as we had reminiscing about putting these stories together. And we had a bucket load, but we've condensed it. Very quickly, our background, we lived our first year and a half of marriage in Southern California. Patricia was a teacher and I was with an international education company. And we heard about Shackley the week before we moved back to Colorado. And we actually sponsored the day before we moved. And we had very little exposure, but we caught the dream. And so it's not surprising that Shackley, being the people business it is, that there are a lot of stories. But the ones we put together for you tonight, we hope you find something that inspires you. I know these are stories that helped us grow. Perhaps it'll help you grow. In our travels, one time we were back in Santa Rosa, California, and we went to the Charles Schulz Museum, the originator of Peanuts cartoon. And we learned there that Snoopy, every time he composed a new book, he had this signature way of starting the story. And the story was, it was a dark and stormy night. And
so we're going to tell you some dark and stormy night stories. And the first one was early in our career. And I had been invited to a skincare presentation in California before we heard about Shackley, and was very impressed with the woman who was presenting, even thought about selling that line. And then fortunately we were introduced to Shackley, but I emulated a lot of what I saw her do that night, and several nights. So in those dark and stormy nights, I was driving to Boulder, Colorado. Now we were living in Denver, and Boulder was about an hour away one way to do this presentation. And the way this happened, because we had moved back to Denver, and I hadn't lived in Colorado for 7 years. And my family in that meantime also had left the home I grew up in. And so I lost a connection with a lot of people, but I found some high school friends and invited them to a skincare presentation. And from that presentation, one of my high school friends said, I will have a presentation for you. So that started the drives to Boulder, and because she hosted an event for me, and it was a really fun event. I was just really learning how to do it, so probably making a lot of mistakes, but I was excited, and the women could feel it. And Hannah talking about taking the boxes, what was bags and bags of products and mirrors and bowls and washcloths and so on. But at the end of the presentation, I always offered a gift for anyone who would have a presentation for me. And one of the women, I could just see her today, said, oh, I'll have one for you. And another woman, that shows us Dawn today, got up during the presentation and said, may I use your phone? And she ran and called her friend and said, you just got to see this line. And actually from that friend whom she called had a presentation, and a sales leader and many sales leaders under her came from that phone call, but from that one event. But anyway, the woman who said, well, I'd love to do a presentation, went on to become a senior business leader. But there were many dark and stormy nights that I drove back and forth from Littleton to Boulder. And sometimes it would be 11 or 12:30 at night before I would get home, because most of the presentations were at night. And you just did it. I mean, we didn't even think this is something we should or shouldn't do. We did it because we were willing to make it work, because we knew that Shackley was going to offer us an opportunity to have a better life than we thought we had before. So anyway, another of those dark and stormy nights was based around my mother. Now, my mother was pretty disappointed that we were doing Shackley, to be really honest with you. I felt kind of badly for her. She thought I should be teaching school and Dawn should have a real job, but she did have a real job. But she was willing to help us, and she ended up being our real cheerleader. So by the now we were breaking directors, and we had gone full time. And my mother was on a flight coming back from St. Louis to Denver, sitting next to a gentleman that she did not know, but my mother could talk to anybody and did talk to most everybody. And so she said, after talking to Bill, his name is Bill, she said, you really need to talk to my son-in-law. So
she got back from that flight, and she handed me this card and said, you have to go to Phoenix. I said, really?
She said soon.
She said, yeah, this guy wants to hear the business. So I give him a call, and I said, Bill, and I introduced myself. You were next to my mother-in-law on a flight. Oh, yeah, that was great. And when are you coming to Phoenix? And I said, how about a week from today? And he said, great. He said, my wife is is an outstanding artist, and she has an art studio in the back of our home in Central Phoenix. You can stay there while we learn about this business. I said, terrific. But I said, I'm not going to leave until you have at least 5 people in your organization. He said, great, okay. So I'm off to Phoenix, and that's exactly what happened. He had 5 people in the next few days, and he had a tremendous source of people. And out of this group, and I know Barb knew some of these people, came leaders, John and Viv, and Peggy, and so on. But Bill made it to director, and then was lured away into another multi-level company that fizzled, and he disappeared from the landscape. But Vivian and John remained. And fast forward now to here we are, 2022. John and Viv are in their 90s, early 90s. They are still so vibrant. They are still so excited about what Shackley has done in their life. They have fantastic health. And one other side story, John was vice president of an asphalt division of Gulf Oil, and they disbanded the division, and he lost his job. And during that time, it was a tough time to find a job. And the Shackley business kept perking and pulled him through till he could find that next career. But lessons learned, sometimes you're not going to feel fully prepared to just do things. I probably could have sat on that and analyzed it 15 different ways. And really what happens, it's not important how you do it. It's really important that you do it. You can do a lot of things wrong, mess up a whole bunch. And if you have the right person in front of you, great things happen. But from that, we really moved into another dark and stormy night.
And it really was a dark and stormy night in January 26th. And we had scheduled a business presentation at our house. And we waited, we were all ready at, refreshments and had our chart ready to show the business. And nobody came. And we kind of moped around for a minute, thought, gee, that.
Probably never happened to anybody
else. But, and we were, at that point, we were key coordinators, and things were hopping. I mean, and then, so Donna had this idea. I don't know what inspired you to say it. But.
Well, I said, looks like nobody's going to show. And that was an understatement. Right. And I said, I have an idea. Why don't we make a run for master? Well, in those days, you needed to have 15 first level directors to be a master. We had 11. It was January. She said, when do you want to make master? And I said, how about the end of May? And she, whoa, that's a little quick. And I said, well, we have 2 really good ones in the hopper. And I said, I have an idea. Let's do 100 business presentations in the next 60 days. And she kind of backed into the dishwasher, and I said, it's possible. And she said, well, how are we going to do that? I said, I don't know. We're just going to talk to everybody. Well, I could give you a lot more details, but the end of the story is we failed miserably.
Well, you forgot the incentive.
Oh, yes. I said, if we do this, I'll take you to the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, which is a place she always wanted to go. And now she had purpose, and she was laser focused, and I was too. But we failed. We only gave 68 presentations, but we uncovered 2 more builders. We broke 4 directors by the end of May. The 2 we had, the 2 new ones, and we have never looked back from that. And that was really a game changer. And I think the other thing that that happened is even the people that said, gee, I'm not interested, they got more interested in product. In 2 months, our volume went up 5,000 PV. And the moral to this story is we simply stirred the pot. We simply got incredibly active, but you don't have to do that every month or even every year in your career. If you'll do something like that 1 or 2 times, you can launch a career forever. And so that was not a dark and stormy night. That was a bright, bright day in our business. And I guess years later, you did get to go to the Broadway. Yeah.
By that time, we had 2 kids and we took them with us. So, but, you know, I think we talked about that, those 2, let's see, it was February, we had February, March, April, and May. So we had 4 months, but we had 60 days in which to find, you know, to reach those 100. Boy, what I look back on that and thought, you know, I mean, we asked everybody that called, or, you know, we would go through our list that we met. If we, you know, we'd like to show you what we do. And we were doing 2 and 3 presentations a day. I think it was most exhausted I think I've ever been in the time we worked our business, but the fear was gone. It was really interesting. That I guess you just didn't care because we were working for numbers, and it really, and we learned a lot about ourselves during that time. And I wish we could tell some stories, but I honestly can't remember. There were so many, but we did surface two new people that then broke,
Yeah.
became directors. So anyway,
Well, as we wrap this up, we want to leave you with something really, maybe the most important thing, obviously the most important thing we will say tonight, and it's based around 4 words that Patricia will share with you. We were fortunate, as were the other masters on this call, to know Gary Burke. And Gary gave us so much in this business, but his little bits of wisdom were just rare and so simplistic sometimes, but just so valuable. We took a river cruise out of Budapest, Hungary, with Gary and Faye, and I don't think it was on this trip, but the question came up, or how do you change behavior, or
what changes it?
what changes effort? And what happened?
Oh, it was, so this was at a conference in Atlanta, pretty early in our career, I would think. And I remember where we were sitting, and actually it sounds goofy, but what I was wearing and everything, just because it just impacted me. But his whole speech was, what changes effort? And after he discussed it, the bottom line is this: hope for the future. And I sat there it took me a while to really say, okay, what does that really mean? But in reality, it was hope for the future that we decided to do this, that on the day that we were shown Shackley that afternoon before we moved. And it was hope for the future that we made a run for those 100 presentations. So, you know, for all of us, it's what is in it for our future. And I think that is so important today. I guess my final comment I'd like to say is we don't always see the benefits at the time for the work we put in and for that effort, or for those late nights, or for, you know, being down on your hands and knees and all the things that it takes to build a business, or, you know, looking around the room and people are asleep, but you just keep moving forward because there is hope for the future. But I can tell you now that after all these years of being in Shackley, and I think Don and I, everyone of the people speaking tonight, have been in the longest, is that we didn't, we didn't see our rewards right away. They came eventually, but you know what? I appreciate what we have today more than ever. We have time to be with our grandchild, our first little grandchild, and we're in a community where it's all ages, but we see a lot of people that are on fixed incomes. And what a blessing at this stage in our life to have a bonus check that arrives every month, and that it gives you a lifestyle and an opportunity to give back to society and for all the the benefits and the good that we've had. So anyway,
And thank you again, Alan and Hannah, for
Yes.
inviting us. And back to you, Alan.
Well, thank you very much. Again, a terrific couple. And our final speaker is Shackley Senior Master Coordinator from the Midwest, Barbara Lagoni.
Well, you'll be happy to know I have one eye on the clock, so I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of this. I will spare some of the wonderful stories, but they just kept coming to mind as I was hearing all the rest of you speaking. One of my favorites was when we were doing healthy home meetings in people's homes, and one of our leaders was doing a demonstration, one of the famous ones, with iodine and Nature Brite. And it happened that it was in a living room with white carpeting, and you can kind of imagine what happened. And the iodine somehow got bumped and spilled onto the white carpet, and everybody in the room gasped. And the poor woman who was doing the demonstration grabbed the Nature Brite and tried to pour it all over the iodine, and they got a rag, and every bit of the iodine came out of the white carpeting, and everybody at the meeting bought Nature Brite. So that's the only funny story you're going to get, because we don't have a lot of time. But I do want to pick up on where Pat and Don just left off. And that is that our assignment tonight was twofold. One was to share the stories, but the other was to also share what it took for each of us to become master coordinators and senior master coordinators, and the effort that it took. And once our vision was strong enough, once our goals were just so important, then it just became the discipline of staying focused every day on what we needed to do that day, that week, that month, that quarter, that year. We learned that discipline through our work with Shackley. And every night before I went to bed, and what happened with me, the short story is that I had never set a goal to be a master coordinator. I was quite happy as a key coordinator because all of my friends were key coordinators. And so we could hang out at conventions. We could go to the key coordinator dinner all together. Everything was fine until Roland Osterhaus showed up, became the chair of the Masters Executive Committee, and he spoiled everything by forming this dream team. And then all the masters started adopting key coordinators and sucking them into being part of this dream team that were making a commitment to go to master. And there I was left all by myself as a key coordinator, all my friends going off into the dream team. So what could I do? I had to go too. And it was such a powerful commitment that I made, somewhat for myself because I wanted to be with my friends, but really there is no way I would have disappointed the people who were standing for me, who were encouraging me, who were helping me to reach that really major goal. And I wasn't planning on telling you that tonight, but I realized listening to the other stories that we all have to have that reason. That's a real burning desire. And I would like to propose a reason, no matter what age you are tonight joining us, is something that's happened in our organization over the last 2 years that was unusual. There were a number of leaders were coming from other companies. And there's something about seeing your business through new eyes, through fresh eyes. When people come from the outside and they come and they look at us, it helps us see ourselves in a new light and seeing how much they loved what they saw in Shackley, how much more appealing it was than where they had been, how much more welcoming it was than where they had been. And they just, they had income that they were dependent on generating. And so I watched how they worked, and they worked as hard as the Tuvels and the Sherapans and the Semekas and the stories we're telling you tonight. I'm telling you, there wasn't a night I went to bed that I didn't have a tablet next to my bed. And every night I either read the scrolls, if you were listening to all the training that we have had on Wednesday mornings with Danelle, when she read about, I will greet this day with love in my heart. I read that every night. And then I would write my goals for the next day and the people I was going to talk to the next day. I did that every night. So when I went to bed, I was holding in my thoughts the next people that I wanted to work with, that what I would think through about what do they need? What do they need to learn next? And so on. That's how focused it was. It was really a wonderful time. And so that's what they do. I see them. They every month, they set a goal for the month. And then they set a goal for that week. And then every day in that month, they work toward that goal. And you know what? They work until the last minute of the last hour of the last day of the month. And that's what I did too. I never would end my month on the 28th because I hit my 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever the level was at the time. I kept going until the very end of the month to see how much I could generate. That's what I see. The effort is worth it. And the goals, when you have a powerful goal like that, it's so motivating. It gives you so much energy. And so what happened just last week is I had a conversation with one of those leaders, and she said something to me that I had never heard before. And she said that in her old company, every week there were quotas. And if you didn't make your quota by Wednesday night at midnight or whatever it was, you didn't get paid anything. No matter how much work you had done, you didn't get paid for any of it unless you made the total quota. So the pressure every week was enormous, that you always had to keep producing, promoting, selling constantly. And then she saw our sales plan. And she saw how we build our customer base. And those customers become lifelong customers. They become lifelong friends. And so they're a joy to be with because we see, we're in contact with them, we service them. They're a beautiful part of our business. And then if we build our leaders, it's the same. It's this wonderful team and organization that we build that is, and that creates residual income. And so when you're at my age, 76, you don't have pressure. You work for the joy of the day and you work for the joy of the work, but you don't have to, like, every single week, as it was in their case, have to produce, have to sell a certain amount. And so she said to me, she said, when I came here and I saw you and I saw how your life is, you know, I'm sure I work 40 hours a week, but it never feels like work. It's such a joy. And she said, I want to be Barb. I want to be two Vels. I want to be Pat and Don. I want to be Hannah and Alan. That's what I want to be. So I'm motivated to work hard now because I want to be them. One of the other ones said to me when she came, she said, I wanted a company I could grow old with. It's like, hey, we got old, you know? We've got people in their 90s who are fully active in their businesses. It's so wonderful. So I say to you as my closing thought is wherever you are in your life. I love working with the young families. Most of us build our businesses on young families because it's ideal to be able to be home with your children and contributing to the family income and have a career where you can learn and grow. But I also love the over 50 crowd, you know, the over 60 crowd. They've learned a lot of life lessons. They have a lot of wisdom. They have a lot of freedom. They probably have the most freedom they've ever had in their life. And so what a great time to really consider expanding, to grow our businesses, grow ourselves, grow our customers, grow our leaders, do it for the money, do it for the fun, do it for the adventure, do it for the friendships that you make. I mean, as each of the leaders were sharing tonight, I was just cherishing the memories and their friendships. And so that's my closing thought, is that what a wonderful legacy we all leave, to know that we've helped others to a lifestyle and a business like we've been able to have, that they then can pass on and on forever. So thank you for inviting all of us tonight. Hannah, I wish we could hear from all the folks who are on the call and where they are in their businesses, but it's really been a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you, Barb, and thank you, everybody. And to summarize, I've got 5 points that I've gleaned from everybody that I think capture it. Number one, you all have dreams, so continue to dream. Turn that dream into a vision as to what you want to accomplish with your business. See the big picture, whether it's presidential master coordinator, executive coordinator, whatever it is for you, see that big picture and go for it. And as Dr. Shackley would say, as people tonight when they spoke, keep on keeping on. And bottom line, have fun. Would you agree that all of our speakers tonight have had fun in their businesses? I think so too. So Scott, if you could unmute everybody and thank Steve Tuvell, Don and Pat Semeka, Barb Lagoni, and Hannah. Glad you could all be here tonight. Unmute yourself if Scott didn't.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, each and every one. Get on your space bar and talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your
Appreciate it.
inspiration. Appreciate it. Have a great week. Happy
What a
Thanksgiving.
great- What a great
Happy
group.
Thanksgiving.
Proud
Thank
to call
you.
you
Happy
all friends.
Thanksgiving.
Happy holidays, everybody. Nighty up.
Bye.